All right. We are live. Okay. Good morning. Thanks, folks out in social land, for joining us for Connect the Dots, our bi-weekly web tech talk show. Just a little bit about where we got the idea. I used to listen to the car guys on NPR, and I just remember people calling in asking how to get their carburetor fixed. And these two chaps just seemed to have all the answers. And if they didn't, they'd always follow up and help people out. And we noticed that there was a lot of questions that our customers had that were a bit technical in nature, mostly marketing folks that in task with large kind of digital projects. And one of them actually mentioned that, why don't you kind of have a show and we'll just kind of talk about technology in a nice open way, and have people call in as well. So the idea here is, if you are listening in on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, ask us some questions. We're at your service. Marie and Natalie are managing the show behind the scenes. Thank you, guys. So let's get on with it. This week, we have a super special guest, Chris Becker, personal friend and a great colleague in the digital space, whose focuses spanned many different technologies, projects, and customers. But maybe, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Super cool. You made some time this morning to join us.
Absolutely.
Why not just tell everyone a bit about yourself, and we'll get the conversation started.
So yeah, thanks, Chris. As you mentioned, we've friends and have worked together on and off. So my background is consulting, large scale change, digital transformation, going back way too long. I won't go too far back in order to not date myself too much, but basically working with large organizations to try to leverage technology in one form or another to advance or implement some strategic objective. And more, now more than ever, almost every element of business has some technology enablement component. So I grew up in CRM and ERP space, going way back, where large companies try to transform from legacy systems into whatever the wave of technology you have to deal with. Back then, it might be integrated systems, and then moving to the cloud, and then now obviously AI, and through all of those, it's a never-ending kind of continuous process. So I've worked in large, in-house with big consulting firms, all the way through to SaaS startups in the aughts, through first .com boom, second .com financial meltdown, and then about 10 years ago started our digital transformation managed service company, NetEffect. So in keeping with that, work with large companies, but really try to instill that startup kind of agile mindset, keeping in mind that, they're still big bureaucratic companies, but how do you affect change and bring those technologies to bear to stay competitive, to implement a certain strategic objective, but do it in a practical way. So I am not the techie in the world, but obviously live in the world of tech. So my role within our company is really to work with business owners to articulate and understand their strategic objectives and convert those and translate them into programs and projects, often including the change management people component, which is always a big piece. And then we have our tech teams, people much smarter than me, who can put the puzzle pieces together and make things happen. And most of that's in large enterprise and internal, and all the way through to e-commerce.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned change, and lots of change going on in your country over the past few days. So yeah, we'll kind of keep an eye on things happening there, and we'll get back to some of the changes that you've had in some of your side projects too. I noticed you've got a Better Roads logo behind you there, and I'd love to know a little bit more about that as well, and I'll get to that. But
sure.
Just as a reminder for folks that are listening in, thank you, and it's really cool. Just ask them some questions in the social channels. We get a text on the private channel here, and we'll do our best to answer any of your questions. But Chris, maybe you could reflect and share back to some of our listeners who are typically CMOs, or kind of in a higher marketing position that have often got tasked with a big digital modernization or transformation type of project. Is there anything that you can speak to that may give them some things to think about and quick starts, or how is change
Sure.
managed differently than it was in the past?
Yeah. I think from a CMO's perspective, or from a business perspective more generally, there's a lot of things that are opportunities to save time and money down the road that you can capitalize on early, which is an opportunity. But if they're missed, they can become challenges or expensive mistakes further down the road. So it all kind of boils down to, maybe I'm old fashioned, but basically measure twice and cut once. I think in the digital world, with whatever the project is, it's natural to be drawn to the most tangible elements of whatever the project is, which means software, technology, data, project structure, project management, whatever those things are. And it can almost create gravity and a pull for the business people, the marketers, the CMO, to kind of jump to that. And, what software are we going to use? How are we going to configure it? Who's going to implement it? What's IT's job? And when are they going to get started? Those types of things. And I think not enough time is spent upfront. And I'll say business case, but it doesn't have to be like 100-page business case document. It's not a school project, but it's really understanding what problems are we trying to solve? What are the options that we have in order to solve them? Have we spent time with the right stakeholders who are going to be necessary in the successful realization of whatever technology elements being implemented 6 months, 9 months, a year, or more sometimes down the road? And are they being involved early on? So I would say, with that kind of general point in mind, like spending that time up front and making sure you have a real understanding of what success looks like, what problem you're trying to solve, and what metrics you're going to use to measure that. And those are business metrics. Almost no discussion of technology at that point. And then secondly, who are the stakeholders that need to be who are going to be required to ensure success? And that's where the change management element comes in. And my experience has been, it's usually a larger group of people than you think at first glance. So it's like, well, marketing and IT and the executive suite. Yes, but who else? So I'll give one. In my experience, the delay in projects going live, whether it's a web platform migration or a new product build out, digital product build out, almost without exception, the delay for me has been risk and security, legal or IT security elements. And I'm talking in larger corporations. And it can often be traced back to not involving those groups early in the process. And then they get brought in too late, and they raise perfectly legitimate questions and concerns. And it causes a delay in the project. So that would be one of my classic examples of where, if there's some involvement with a broader stakeholder group, and sometimes it feels like, oh, we want to get started, but spending some time with these people early on actually will get you to your goal faster. And my experience has been, almost without exception, there's been a delay because those types of folks aren't involved early enough.
It's a great point, actually. We recently had a project where we were also asked to bring in the platform. So, what are we going to use? This was a web project, so there was a content platform, some commerce elements, data, search, all these kind of composable pieces of stuff that we're going to connect all together. And what we didn't realize at the time is part of the challenge to us to enable them to get the project off the ground was to help them get pricing on all this stuff when you have bits and pieces of projects coming in. And some of the discussions I had with marketers are like, what we want isn't that complicated. But when you start embedding platforms and technologies, it starts to ring the doorbells of the kind of IT stakeholders, of the security folks, And I'm just wondering if you've had any experiences in kind of fast tracking parts of a project that can kind of get underway a little bit sooner, and if there is kind of a marketing decision maker who has a lot on the line and needs to get some stuff done, I don't know if you have any ideas around that or approaches.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it directly answers the question, but there's a couple of things that come to mind. One ties back to my earlier point, putting together what we used to call, so if you're, let's say we're talking about building out a major web, and it could be a content or product digital experience. Getting some brief of the scope of the project, almost like an elevator pitch. It was like, here's the it's the FAQs you need to know about this project, getting them into the hands of the risk folks, the OGC, the IT security, and just almost opening up a forum there. So that's, that's something that I think actually starts to fast track some conversations that may feel like it's actually slowing you down, but I guarantee will speed you up further down. So dropping that payload into the system early, I think is ultimately helps things go faster. The other one I think is looking at some of the parallel paths where you can get people that need to be directly involved. So some of it's more general stakeholders like the ones I'm mentioning. Some are primary owners. So yes, IT, but that's kind of where everybody kind of goes to by default. So let's take marketing, for example. Almost without exception, depending upon the size of the transformation, there's going to be a people and process change going on that is driven or implied by the technology change. What's happening there? Who's doing that? Who are the people that are getting involved in that? And I think you can get things moving. Like, let's say you're still collecting prices or you're doing software selection, and that can, there's hangups. Oh, procurement has a process, and now I've got to go through procurement. Things you and I have both seen sometimes together, right? So that's all going to happen, and it's going to take its own time. You can speed things up by, for example, with the marketing group, if there's a content migration element to it, doing a content audit. Sounds extremely boring. It can actually be quite interesting. I should probably come up with a better name for it. But going in and really understanding your content structure, your content architecture, your content elements, and there's an opportunity to clean up what you've got so that by the time you're actually doing the work with the new system or whatever happens, and I know we're talking generically about, but almost without exception, there's some version of what I'm talking about. You're basically cleaning house before. So the actual size of the project, when let's say technology finally comes to bear and you're ready to go, you've taken something that was this big, but X% of it was unnecessary. Don't even need it. It's like, now that we're looking at it in detail, we don't need this stuff anymore. Nobody uses it. Does anyone even look at these 55,000 pages anymore? So that's an example of where, and the other advantage of that is you're getting the marketing department or the business people directly engaged in the effort. It's not this thing that IT is doing to you. It's actually something that you're owning, and it has a byproduct payload benefit of getting the people who are going to be required to succeed. You're going to need to succeed. Even if the technology is perfect, if you don't have the buy-in, you're dead. So it's giving you that catalyst to get people directly involved as well. And it gets you, and you can move on that. I don't need pricing. I don't need software to move on those types of things.
And you mentioned in passing platforms. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's happening in the platform world today. I think we met with an Adobe overlap, and then there was mention of .cms. There's Contentful. There's kind of these headless versus monoliths, and WordPress having all kinds of shenanigans going on. What's your take? Where does NetEffect stand?
Yeah, I think we're in a better place now than we've been in a long time. And I'm going back 15, 20 years where, early on you had a lot of bespoke systems that were fit for purpose, but you kind of had to go all in. And then you started to see more ecosystems being built out, whether it was the Drupal or ecosystem or the WordPress ecosystem, or then, going full enterprise corporate, the Adobe ecosystem. And you still had to buy in, but you had a bit more flexibility within there. But it gave you a much broader set of capabilities. But once you were in, it was kind of, learning, you're either learning Chinese or English. And once you were in, you were kind of, you were committed. The cost of the switching costs are high. And I think now you're able to kind of see post that. And through that, there was the whole headless, non-headless. I think it was kind of, there was a bit of, I think there was a bit of froth or fattiness to the whole headless thing. It was going to solve everybody's problems because you could separate the publishing from the authoring. And and I think we're on the other side of that, where the core value of the opportunities of headless has been retained, and some of the frothiness, where it was pretty, if you're a techie, it was pretty cool shit, but was there a business purpose to it? That's a lot of that's burned off. And you're down now to, if I'm a CMO and I've got a digital lead, or, who knows, depending on the structure of the company, if there's a chief digital officer or a head of digital transformation, whatever, it doesn't matter. Somebody who's kind of on point, they've got so many choices now where I think you can really make a fit for purpose. And I don't mean software A or software B, that's an element to it. But building, I think it's underestimated sometimes that it's okay to kind of do best in class for your e-commerce element and your content publishing element and your authoring components and how you engage with your content creators and outsourcing certain elements. You have more choices now than ever. How can you implement AI into that, whether it's development or content creation or analytics. You have more choices now than ever. Now, I think beyond that, sometimes there's the fallacy of choice. There's almost too much. But if you can take a methodical approach, tools are not the problem anymore. 20 years ago, tools were the problem. You ended up grinding yourself into tech morasses because this didn't work or that didn't work. Or if you're going to want to do this, you had to go all in on system A or system B. I think the technology ecosystem is mature and robust as ever. And now it's really back to the business people to make informed decisions that might be a little harder up front, but are much more rich and sophisticated and fit for purpose for the business downstream. So for example, Adobe, obviously, they're very strong at being able to sell you the entire ecosystem. I think it's more than what a lot of companies need, a lot more than what a lot of companies need. And you can get caught up in a fairly complex purchase when it's not really needed. There's a lot of, other solutions out there that might be more fit for purpose or really a good place to start. So I think what I think is a challenge now is it puts the onus back on the business people to really have a clear and very clear understanding of what it is so that their technology partners can help give them the best choices. And it's got to be a thoughtful process, and it's not just column A or column B anymore.
You mentioned two things I wanted to just dig in a little bit around. Maybe AI first. Everyone has their own kind of knowledge of, I guess, the scope of AI and what's going on now and what's been kind of promoted for the future. What are you guys doing? Anything new and interesting on the AI front?
I'll tell you my personal story of this, because I think, so I'm 53, and I remember when, I took my MIT online course, and this was even like 2.5 or 3 years ago. And even then it was called the machine learning course. How much times have changed. And I was kind of like, yeah, it was interesting. I kind of learned a few things, but nothing that I thought was business applicable. So trying to stay up on this. Now, again, this was 2 or 3 years ago. And then when the AI was really picking up, NVIDIA, which I wish I'd kept the stock. I owned it when it was a video game chip, not when it was an AI solve the world's $1 trillion company, become part of the S&P 500 and displace Intel business stock. Anyways, and it came along the second time, and I got to tell you, Chris, I was like, oh, fuck this. I'm like, do I really want to lean in and learn the next new thing and figure out how it's going to bake into our business? So I kind of went through a denial phase, to be perfectly honest. And I tell you that story partly because I wonder if other people in similar roles, either on the client side or on the consulting side, had that. Because I'm telling it because I definitely had that. It was kind of like, I don't know if I really. So your first thing is almost denial. But over the last year or so, leaned in and trying to separate the wheat from the chaff like any new technology. But I do believe there's obviously huge value and big things are happening. The market valuations and multiples, these people aren't stupid. There's definitely real value there. So what we're doing is really trying to see where we can use it in our own business. So, with both NetEffect and some of our clients like Better Roads, which has a big e-commerce piece, challenging the team and supporting the team to really learn for themselves and understand. So that includes sometimes internal projects where if we have an annual or quarterly meeting, I ask people to come in and talk about a case study where they've been able to use something. And it could even just be an experiment. And that includes me as well. So for my podcast, for example, I'm trying to automate and use AI for doing ads and things like that, and kind of streamlining the process. So really challenging people and rewarding people for bringing it into their day-to-day life, which I think is more kind of the Apple approach with Apple Intelligence. They're not trying to come out and sell the sizzle. They're just kind of looking for small wins. And then the other piece is, where can we support our clients where we do think there's more disruptive opportunities? And for us in let's say the web and digital world, the two major areas I think are development. Where can you streamline more kind of housekeeping dev tasks and QA tasks in the maintenance and managed services side of a business and technology support? And then the other one is content, and on the creative side, where are you able to, for your creatives and your content, author community, where can these tools not replace them, but help them be more effective, where you can get, a certain multiple of value out of your core team? Not that different than, maybe what you're seeing or what we're seeing as kind of the threat and the debate going on in Hollywood right now. But this would be more on a day-to-day basis. So those are the two areas more that I think are directly related to where there's real transformational opportunities in the business.
We're having chats internally about just how disruptive or impactful AI will be. They can write some pretty decent React code now, but we're just kind of plotting out, well, how far away are we from, we just tell it which Salesforce connectors to go grab some data out of a certain set of fields and records, and like, why don't you grab something out of Shopify, and we'll go and and you can just start telling it how to kind of organize its to get things done. Then you're like, we're building applications that are really tight and dialed in. So that's kind of exciting, but also a little bit eerie at the same time. You mentioned Better Roads, and I have been a customer of Better Roads. Actually, I use your service to send gifts to my friends in the United States.
Nice.
I'm up in Toronto.
I know appreciate that.
Down south of the border, but I love it if you could share what you're doing there.
Yeah. So kind of the pivot point off of NetEffect, so, which is a digital transformation managed services technology company. One of our clients, but it's also a startup that I'm directly involved in, is Better Roads. So I'm here in one of the offices where I also do a podcast. But basically, Better Roads is a premium beverage company focused on the non-alcoholic sector. So it's a small but growing category within beverage, which is offering adults non-alcoholic alternatives, but in types of products that allow them to still socialize and not feel like they're missing out. So if you're out with your friends and you're not drinking, if you're having a water or a Diet Coke or a soda water or lime, sometimes you're feeling like a second-class citizen. So adult non-alc is really non-alc beer, non-alc wine, ready-to-drink mocktails, beverages that aren't trying to emulate an alcohol version. And most of the customers in this space is really about also have alcohol. So you might be drinking one day, but you're driving with your friends the next, or you're pregnant and you want to socialize with your friends, but you don't want to give your secret away, or you're participating in Dry January, or you're training for a marathon, or you get your buzz through gummies, but you still want to have a beer, but you don't want the alcohol. There's a health and wellness component to it. So Better Roads is a company that brings what we believe is the next generation of brands. We have a collection of products that we bring to market, as well as an online marketplace. So we have the largest marketplace of non-alcoholic brands in the United States, over 350 brands and labels and SKUs. And that's where the e-commerce piece comes in. It's as a new category, how do you educate non-alc wine or non-alc beer, plus the selection and coming up with subscriptions and curated boxes for cocktail clubs and dry January survival kits and you name it. So it's an interesting use case from a digital perspective because you're bringing a product, there's an e-commerce element to it in terms of it's an online marketplace, but it's also behind the scenes headless. We do Amazon and we do B2B e-commerce platforms as well, like Air Goods and Fair, but it's all coming from the same business.
I think we lost me or we lost Chris. Oh no. I'm just going to give this a minute. Oh, one sec. Okay.
I don't know what happened.
No worries. There people were like taking your Wi-Fi, ordering stuff from your e-commerce store.
Maybe there's a huge influx of sales.
Yeah,
I obviously need some
away.
technology support. I might have to hire you. Where did I lose you?
I think you're just getting on. Well, first of all, I love the idea that you kind of highlighted that it isn't an either or kind of thing. Like it's huge. Not like I'm a non-alc person and I am. I like that idea of kind of fitting it in through the week and new tastes and new combinations of things. You're just getting to the part where your organization is really looking at kind of multi-channels. You use the word headless. You got Amazon. You got your e-commerce thing. You've got other stuff going on. And how do you put that all together?
Yeah. So. And I saw that there was a question that came in about, what's the future look like for enterprise tech and where would you see, like it to go? And I'll use Better Roads as maybe the enterprise example. I think, where I'd like to see it go and, whether it will or not is back to my earlier point about this ecosystem of elements that I can, you can really with AI kind of as the newest, exciting element of it, where the business really has no excuses anymore. It's not like, in the past 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even my own experience with, PCs going back to the 90s, what percentage of my time was I wrestling with technology versus actually using technology? And, in the 90s, it might've been 50-50. How much time I was dealing with fixing something or loading something versus using it. Now, and that ratio's changed. Now I think it's, even 1 to 99. You have no excuses as a business anymore to not be able to leverage technology. And the question then becomes, how do you want to use it? So what I'd like to see is really how our technology vendors, what you do for a living, what I do for a living, what IT organizations and executives do inside their organizations, whether they're part of the official IT department or not, they have a digital accountability, really being curators of solutions and not gatekeepers of technology. So really having an understanding of what's available, done the homework of what are my options, what are the pluses and minuses, costs and benefits of various elements of technology, how do they fit together, what are the use cases where we've seen them, what are our competitors doing, having that landscape of intelligence done, and then having real dialogues with the business stakeholders who own the budgets and have the ultimate accountability for results so that they can really get into solutioning. Now, what that means is the business, that's a challenge back to the business as well to say, okay, guys, let's have a real conversation. We're not going to talk about how much technology costs or my project plan for implementation. That's all going to happen. We're now going to talk about what does success look like? What are the metrics for success? Here are the options. Let's work through it. And often I think it's going to drive a conversation of, has the business even really thought this through? Have they got the buy-in that they're going to need? Let's say we successfully implement a technology 100% perfect, under budget, ahead of schedule. It can still fail because a lot of those things don't happen. So I think it's exciting that we can get kind of to a post-technology world where of course it's there, but it's like electricity or water, plumbing in your house. It's there, but I'm drinking water, but I didn't talk about the sink, and I didn't talk about the faucet, and I didn't talk about the water meter outside. I'm
That's
talking
another
about
show, Chris's
Yeah.
plumbing show.
I'm talking about what I'm doing with the water to solve a problem,
Yeah.
whether I'm thirsty or whatever. So I maybe that's probably not a good analogy, but that idea of that's the type of dialogue that I think technology executives or people or vendors need to be having with the business, and less about the sausage making.
Well, I am thirsty actually. I'm gonna go get a huge glass of water.
Speaking of,
Hey, speaking of, but before we go, lots of folks listen to this. This becomes a podcast afterwards, and maybe Chris, can you just let folks know how they can get a hold of you? I think you started a whole bunch of interesting thought starters. How do people reach out to you?
Absolutely. So, I mean, on LinkedIn, I'm pretty easy to find if you search for Chris Becker, and NetEffect. So it's Chris.Becker, Becker at net-effect.com. Or Chris@betterroads.com. You're going to find me. Happy to talk and reach out anytime.
That is awesome. And time is something that goes by fast when you're chatting away. So, hey, we've got to go. We're just a little bit over. Hey, thanks a lot for making time
Absolutely.
this morning to
Thanks
join. Really nice chatting with you. And it just seems like, wow, okay, tons of stuff we could deep dive into, and maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Cool.
Thanks to everyone who made time in their morning or early morning on the West Coast to join us and answer questions. Natalie and Marie, thank you for holding things down and producing an awesome show. And we will see everyone in a couple weeks. All right.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thanks, Chris. Ciao.